This happened in the summer of 2017. I was 25 and had just finished a grueling year of grad school. A family friend of my parents, a wealthy couple named the Grahams, reached out to me with an offer that sounded too good to pass up. They were going on a 6-week trip through Europe and needed someone to stay at their house in an upscale, gated community in the hills of Northern California. The job was simple: bring in the mail, water the indoor plants, and just keep the place looking lived in so it wouldn't be a target for burglars. They offered me $3,000 plus a fully stocked fridge. For a broke student, it was a dream come true. The house was a massive, modern structure made of glass, steel, and dark wood. It was tucked away at the very end of a cul-de-sac, backed up against a dense nature preserve. The neighborhood was one of those places where the houses are so far apart that you can't really see your neighbors, and everyone has high hedges or security gates. It was incredibly quiet. The first few days were great. I spent most of my time out on the back deck, reading and enjoying the view of the valley. But because the house was so large and mostly glass, I started to feel a bit exposed once the sun went down. The Grahams had a state-of-the-art security system, but they told me I didn't need to worry about the cameras inside as they were turned off for my privacy. I only had to arm the perimeter alarm at night. About a week into the stay, I started noticing small things that felt slightly off. It wasn't anything dramatic, just things that made me question my own memory. One morning, I woke up and found the heavy sliding glass door in the living room was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it before going to bed, as I had a very specific routine of checking every door. I brushed it off, thinking I was just tired and had forgotten. A few nights later, I was in the kitchen making dinner around 9 p.m. The kitchen had a massive floor-to-ceiling window that looked out onto the side yard and the neighboring property, which was shielded by a row of thick cypress trees. As I was reaching into the cabinet, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked out the window, but it was pitch black outside. I turned off the kitchen light so I could see out better. About 30 feet away, standing right at the edge of the cypress trees, was a man. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, dressed in a plain gray sweatshirt and dark pants, staring directly at the kitchen window. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could tell he was looking right at me. I froze for a moment. Then I walked over to the window and waved, thinking maybe it was the neighbor or a security guard. He didn't wave back. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there for another 10 seconds, then slowly turned around and walked back into the trees. I was shaken, but I told myself it was probably just the neighbor, Mr. Henderson, whom the Grahams had mentioned was a bit eccentric. I made sure every door was locked and armed the alarm. The next day, I decided to walk over to the Henderson property to introduce myself and clear the air. When I got to their gate, I rang the intercom. An older woman answered and told me that her husband, Mr. Henderson, had been bedridden for months and hadn't been outside in weeks. She seemed confused when I mentioned someone walking near the trees. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the house made me jump. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint, rhythmic sound. It was coming from the hallway outside the master bedroom where I was sleeping. It sounded like someone was dragging their fingernails across the wooden floorboards. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. The sound stopped the moment I moved. I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight to look under the door, but I didn't see anything. I didn't have the courage to open the door that night. I just stayed awake until the sun came up. The following morning, I went out into the hallway to investigate. I didn't see any scratches on the floor, but I did find something else. On the wall, right next to the bedroom door, was a small, circular smudge about the size of a coin. It looked like it had been made by a greasy finger. I wiped it off, feeling a deep sense of unease. I decided to call the Grahams to ask if they had any service people scheduled to come by, like a gardener or a pool cleaner. They told me no one was supposed to be there. They suggested I call the neighborhood security patrol if I felt uncomfortable. I called the patrol and they sent a car around. The guard walked the perimeter, checked the gates, and told me everything looked secure. He suggested that maybe a bird had hit the glass or a stray cat was making noise on the deck. He was very dismissive, which actually made me feel a bit better. I wanted to believe it was something mundane. But things only got weirder. 2 days later, I was cleaning up the living room when I noticed a small pile of dirt on the white rug in the center of the room. It wasn't much, just a few granules of dark soil, like someone had stepped there with dirty shoes. I hadn't been outside that day yet, and I always took my shoes off at the door. I looked up at the ceiling, thinking maybe it had fallen from a vent, but there was nothing. That evening, I decided to do something I probably should have done sooner. I went to the security hub in the office and tried to access the camera feeds. The Grahams had told me they were off, but I wanted to see if I could figure out how to turn them back on. To my surprise, the system showed that the cameras hadn't been off at all. They'd been recording the entire time I was there. I sat down and started scrolling through the footage from the previous night. I skipped to the time when I had heard the tapping in the hallway. My blood went cold as I watched the screen. At exactly 2:15 a.m., a man emerged from the guest bedroom at the end of the hall. He wasn't the man in the gray sweatshirt I had seen outside. This man was smaller, wearing a dark jumpsuit. He didn't look like a burglar. He didn't have a bag or any tools. He was barefoot. I watched him as he walked down the hall towards the master bedroom. He moved with a strange, fluid grace, almost like he was practiced at being silent. He reached the door where I was sleeping and stopped. He didn't try to open the door. Instead, he leaned his head against the wood and stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, just listening. Then he reached out and touched the wall, leaving the smudge I had found earlier. He eventually turned around and walked back into the guest bedroom. I didn't keep watching. I grabbed my car keys and my phone and ran out of that house as fast as I could. I didn't even grab my suitcase. I drove to a brightly lit grocery store parking lot and called the police. When the officers arrived at the house, they searched every room. They found the guest bedroom empty, but when they checked the attic access in the guest room closet, they found evidence that someone had been living up there. There was a sleeping bag, several empty water bottles, and a collection of Polaroids. Every single photo was of me. Some were taken while I was reading on the deck, some of me cooking in the kitchen, and a few of me sleeping in the master bedroom, taken from the doorway while the door was cracked open. The police never caught the man. They found that he had been entering and exiting through a small ventilation crawl space that led from the attic to the exterior of the house, hidden behind some heavy shrubbery. They also found out that the man in the gray sweatshirt I had seen in the yard was likely a different person entirely, possibly an accomplice or someone else who had been watching the house. The Grahams came home early and they were horrified. They ended up selling the house a month later. I never went back, even to get my clothes. I had the police retrieve my essentials and left the rest. It's been years now, but I still struggle with the feeling of being watched. Whenever I stay in a new place, the first thing I do is check the attic and the closets. I don't like glass houses anymore, and I always keep the curtains closed as soon as it gets dark. Sometimes when it's very quiet at night, I think I can still hear that faint, rhythmic tapping of fingernails on a wooden floorboards, and I have to remind myself that I'm safe. But the truth is, you never really know who might be sharing a space with you, just out of sight, waiting for you to fall asleep.